and thank you for joining us. We have Dr. Laura Cookson from the Greater Toronto area. That's safe to say, right, Dr. Cookson?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, you got it.
She's going to be presenting about gifts and games that are great for building visual skill, just in time for the holiday season here. And just a reminder, we're going to make use of the chat feature. So if you can go ahead and find that chat icon in your lower toolbar and open up the chat, go ahead and say hello in there just to make sure you found it. Let us know maybe where you're joining from. And if you have questions while Dr. Cookson is presenting, you can go ahead and post your questions there. We will go ahead and take question and answer at the end as well. So either or. And just a quick announcement that the views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this presentation belong solely to the presenter and do not necessarily reflect the views of Vivid Vision or any of the iHeart VT partner organizations. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and Dr. Cookson will take it away.
All right, perfect. Okay, thank you. Now, let's see. All right. Okay, so as Kellen mentioned, so I'm Dr. Cookson. I'm a developmental optometrist in Milton, Ontario, so in Canada, in case you guys are not here. So today we're going to talk about a bunch of different games and activities that you can do with your kids or your students or patients that can help to build different visual skills. We'll talk a little bit about what the visual skills are as well, and if we're having a hard time with that visual skill, how might that affect us in daily life or in a school environment as well too. Okay, so on the first game that we're going to talk about here. So the first game we're going to talk about here is Spot It. So Spot It is a great game in that it's really versatile. You can play it in several different ways. And then depending on how you're playing it, it's going to affect which visual skills you can work on, and you can work on more or less that way. So Spot It is designed for ages 7 and up, but you can actually buy a junior version of Spot It from ages 4 and up. Really, as soon as the child is able to understand the concept of matching and the same, then you'd be able to start playing this game. So it's a really good game for most ages. It's designed to be played with anywhere from 2 to 8 players, but we have one way in vision therapy that we regularly will work with that we can play individually as well too for our patients. So when you purchase Spot It, so it comes in this nice handy traveling tin, so you can easily take it with you wherever you go. And then it comes with a bunch of different Spot It cards, okay? So with the Spot It cards, on each one of them, there's going to be a variety of different pictures on there. And with each of the pictures, so anytime you have 2 cards, there's going to be one picture that matches between the 2 cards, and only ever one picture that matches, okay? So for example, on these 2 cards, there's the cat. So we've got the cat here, and then a cat on that one over there. So that's going to be able to, there's one pair that matches, and then that's it. So what you're going to do for the game, how you're going to play that, and again, there's a couple different ways, but one of the more common ways that we play it. So you're going to have a stack of cards. So each player is going, you basically divide the deck evenly between the players. And then one card is going to be in the center. So each player is going to flip up their card, and then they're going to try to match whatever pictures are on their card, find the match between the one that's in the center. So then they're going to try to find that match as quick as they can, okay? As soon as you find the match, then you place your card on top, and then you just keep going. So then you try to find your next match, and you just keep placing it. And as soon as you find the match, you also call out what the match is as well too. So I would be like, hey, so it's a cat, and then you keep going and put it down there. So this game is great in that, like I said, it works on tons of different visual skills. So for example, let me find here. So with these 2 cards here, if you guys can see those okay, it's going to work on our visual discrimination and our spatial relations. So visual discrimination is telling similarities between things, so which one is the same. So on here we have the carrots and they match, and then again, no other picture matches on there. And visual spatial relations is telling differences between objects. So if you have similar things, can you tell the small differences between them? Also, this game is great in that it works on our visual form constancy, which is our ability to tell that the object is still the same, even though maybe I shrunk it or I made it bigger or I rotated that object, I can still tell it's the same thing. So for example, with our carrots here, so this carrot is a lot smaller than this one, and it's on its side, and this one's upside down. So that's our ability to tell form constancy. It's still a carrot, even though I'm seeing it upside down or on its side. If we're having a hard time with our form constancy, we're going to have a hard time, for example, reading different fonts. So for example, if a child is learning to read and they're learning with fairly simple font, but then they look at other font or someone else's handwriting, they may have a hard time reading that word, even though they know the word, but they don't recognize the letters as the same with that. Okay, so that's how form constancy can affect us in our daily life. As well, that visual discrimination, so telling similarities between things and differences there, that's going to affect, if we're having a hard time with that, that's going to make it really easy for us to confuse similar letters or similar words. So for example, the word where and were, the same word, just one has an H in it and one doesn't. Otherwise, the spelling and the order of the letters is exactly the same. And so if you can't see the little differences or those little details there, then you could mix up those words, and that would be an issue with our visual discrimination that we had mentioned. Okay. Visual memory is also a good one that this works on, in that as I'm going back and forth, I'm going to have to try to remember what pictures were on the card I was looking at, right? And so I'm trying to use that visual memory piece. Also too, it works on our visual figure ground, which is basically our ability to find meaningful or important information in a busy environment or a busy background. So as I'm looking at the cards here, looking back and forth, there's 16 different pictures, and I have to try to remember them and figure out which pieces are important and which pieces I can kind of ignore and not and just disregard them. So for example, here we have the chess piece on this card here. So I know it's a solid black symbol or picture, and there's no solid black symbols over on this card. So I know I can disregard that one and I can just not pay attention to it. And that would be our part of our visual figure ground. Okay, if we're having a hard time with visual figure ground, that's gonna, like we said, it's gonna make it hard to find important object or important information in a busy environment. So for example, if you're getting ready in the morning and you're trying to get your kids out the door and you ask your son or daughter to go grab their shoes from the closet, and they go and look in the closet, and then they're like, I don't know, they're not there, I can't find them. If they have a poor visual figure ground, that could be why they're not able to find them. What happens is they basically get overwhelmed by all the busyness and they can't look for that important information. So I can't find just those red shoes, for example. Also, in a school setting or a classroom setting, if that child is working on a test, for example, and in the test it has a paragraph they have to read and then answer questions or do math questions, for example, based off of the information in the paragraph. If they're having a hard time with visual figure ground, they might struggle with those type of questions on tests. Because if, for example, the question says, what color was Johnny's house? And then they look back in that paragraph and have to scan through that paragraph to try to find that word house. That's the important information, and then find the associated color with it. And if they have a poor visual figure ground, they're going to try to scan through that paragraph and then not be able to find that word house, and they'll have to reread it every time just to find that important information, and that's going to really slow them down. Okay. With this game too, so normally you're playing in a group, that's how it's designed. And so as you're looking for your match and placing your card down on top, someone else that you're playing with, they may find their match ahead of you. And so then they're going to get their card down before you. And then once that happens, now your card doesn't match the same. It's a different picture this time. And so it's going to kind of throw you off, and it's going to add a little level of stress or a little bit of chaos in there. And so that's something we might want to actually work with, is to add a little bit of that level of stress or that little bit of factor of time where you have to try to go quickly. When we're doing that, you can, that's going to help to work on our visual processing speed, as well as something called our rapid automated naming. And rapid automated naming is basically our ability, how quickly can we see something and say the name of it? So how quickly does that brain processing happen? If you're playing individually, if you don't want to have that time factor, if you want the child or the patient or your student just to have the time to focus on the card and find the match and don't worry about the speed and don't get frustrated because they can't find it, they can play individually. Just give them maybe like a stack of 10 cards, and then they just take their time and they take however long they need to try to find that match, and then they can go at their own pace. When you want to start to build a little bit of the time piece in and try to speed them up a little bit once they have that good accuracy, then what you can do is maybe still give them that same stack of 10 cards or whatever, and then just time them and see if the next time they can just beat themselves and try to go as quick as they can on their own. And then once you feel like they're ready or not, then you can play as a group. And then that also adds a little bit of that chaos factor as well too. Okay. Okay, so that's Spot It, just kind of a brief run through and overview of what you can do and some different ways that you can play Spot It. In the tin, when you get it, it does have some instructions in there, and I think it gives you like 3 or 4 different ways to play it. So there's some different variations as well too that you'll get with the game itself too. Okay, perfect. Okay, so just moving on then. So the next game I wanted to talk to you guys about is called Qubits here. So a Qubit is designed, it's designed for ages 8 and up, and then it's for 2 to 4 players. But again, in vision therapy, we often use it individually. You can alter it and adjust how to play it, so you can play it as an individual game as well too. So with Qubits, in the box, you're going to get a bunch of different cards here, and each of the cards has different patterns on it. Okay, so then you also get these trays here with different blocks on it. So there's these little blocks that are loose, and each side of the block has a different design or a different pattern on it. Okay, and so what you're going to do then is you're going to pick a card, and then you're trying to recreate that pattern with the blocks. Okay, so you're just going to flip the blocks around and place them in the position where they would go for that. So once you've done that, then you're going to end up with something that looks like this. Okay. So now we've taken our card and then we've matched the pattern over here and recreated that pattern. So this is going to help with our hand-eye coordination in that the blocks are pretty small. You're going to have to manipulate them and flip them around. And then you're also going to have to place them correctly in the trays here as well. Okay. When you place them in the tray, the blocks are loose. So they are going to, if you don't place it inaccurately, you are going to knock the other blocks around as well too. The blocks actually take up the whole tray once they're in there, which we have had some patients where they're having trouble with their visual spatial skills, and they don't recognize that that's going to take up that whole tray. So they try to place them in, and then they have to shift all the blocks around partway through when they realize the rest of them aren't going to fit. And so that's also going to help on that spatial planning and that spatial awareness, and also our visual closure as well too, which we'll talk about in a sec there. This is also going to help with that visual discrimination we mentioned. So telling similarities. So are these two the same? Are there any differences? Is there anywhere that I messed up on it? Or are they identical? So that's that visual discrimination again. So that visual closure I had mentioned, so that's basically our ability to finish or visualize the complete picture when we have incomplete information. So if I'm only partway done building my, recreating my pattern over here, I have to be able to see what's missing from this picture in order from what I see over here. Okay, and that would be our visual closure. Anytime that we have a hard time with visual closure, so if we have a student or a patient who's struggling with visual closure, often we're going to notice that they have a hard time coming to logical conclusions or finishing their sentences. At the same time, it also affects our reading efficiency and comprehension. And that comes through because as we're reading, we usually will be making a mental picture or like a movie of what we're reading. And if we have really good visual closure, we're able to start reading the sentence and then be able to anticipate what's going to come up. So for example, if the story says that Susie walked down the dock and got into her blank, so probably it's going to be her boat. And as soon as we see that word dock, we're going to anticipate it's likely going to be a boat that she's getting into, not a car, for example. That's using our visual closure. So if we have a hard time with visual closure, we're not going to be able to anticipate that very easily. Okay. It's also working on that visual sequencing. So what order did the blocks need to go in to match it here? And then also our visual memory and our visual sequential memory. Depending on how we're playing the game, we would be able to work on the visual memory and sequential memory too. So with the traditional style of the game, with the regular setup like we had talked about, it's not going to work on visual memory at all. But what you can do if you want to add memory in and work on that is you can have the student or the child grab the card and then get 10 seconds to look at the card and try to memorize the pattern on it, and then put that card down, face down, so they can't see it, and now they try to recreate their pattern. To make that more complicated as they get better, you could have them take a bit of a break in between looking at the card and memorizing it, and then they have to wait, let's say, 30 seconds or 2 minutes or something before they actually recreate the pattern. So you can give them a bit of a time lag there, and then that's going to make it a lot more tricky to try to keep that picture of that pattern in their mind. Another way that we do it when we have, for example, a patient in the office who's struggling with, for example, learning to spell, and the parents practice at night, and they practice all their spelling words, and they've got them all down, and it sounds like they're ready to go for their quiz in the morning, and then they get to school in the morning, and all of a sudden they can't remember how to spell half the words. A lot of times when we learn something in one environment, if we go to a different environment, sometimes we have a hard time remembering exactly what it was. We've all done it where you go upstairs to grab something, and as soon as you've gone up the stairs, you don't even remember what you're grabbing. So one thing you can do with this game that can help with that is take the card and put the card in a separate room or on a different level of the house, for example. And then we have 10 seconds or 20 seconds to go upstairs to memorize this card. And then after we've memorized it for the 10 seconds, then we have to come downstairs, and then we recreate that pattern with our blocks downstairs. Okay. And then that's going to help with that visual memory and the sequential memory. So remembering the order that the pattern went in. Okay. If we're having a hard time with this sequential memory, we're often going to have a hard time, for example, telling a story in sequence or remembering instructions. So if you ask your child to go upstairs and brush their teeth and wash their face and then get into their pajamas, they'll often forget some of those instructions because they can't kind of make that mental image of what order they have to do things in. Okay. And that's Qubits. So that's a pretty straightforward game, but it's a good one that can work on a bunch of different skills there. All right. I'm just going to move those out of the way here. And most of these games too are available either with your local retailers, at any like game stores or at Chapters or Indigo, and then obviously online as well too. So most of them are pretty straightforward and easy to get. All right, so we're going to move on to Parquetry blocks. Okay, so Parquetry blocks here. So with Parquetry blocks, this is probably one of my favorite activities to do in vision therapy when I'm working on these visual information processing skills that we're talking about. The reason being, Parquetry is probably one of the most versatile games that we have out there for vision development. You can do it in a million different ways, and I could probably talk for 2 hours just on Parquetry and all the different ways that you can do Parquetry to work on different skills. So we're going to touch on some different ways and just a general overview of how to use it and adjust things based off of what you want to do. But just get creative with it, because Parquetry, like I said, you can do tons of stuff with that. Okay. So when you buy a Parquetry set, again, they vary a little bit, but usually you're going to get some different wooden blocks that are different shapes and different colors. Sometimes they're plastic blocks as well too. I like the wooden ones just that they're a bit thicker and you can feel it a bit more, and it has a bit more weight in your hand, especially when you're working with younger children. I like to have that. It's a bit easier to manipulate them. And then you're also going to get these patterns that would come with the Parquetry set as well too. Okay, and they're going to start with more simple patterns like this one, where it's fairly obvious, like this one, you know, the green square is going to fit perfectly in there. And there's other ones that are going to get more complex as well too. So one way to do parquetry, and one of the more straightforward or simple ways to do it, would be to give the patient or your child the pattern here, and then they just have to take the blocks and they have to find where those can be placed on the card here, okay? And they match it directly on top, so this would be just sitting on your tabletop. You can also have them do it side by side as well too, so they see the pattern over here and then they have to build it. Once they've built that pattern, then you're going to end up with something like that. Okay, so we recreated that exact same pattern, just in the blocks there. Now, one of the tricks we use is we have plexiglass in the office, these plexiglass sheets, and then sticky tack, and that's one of the best things you can do with parquetry, because then you're able to manipulate the shapes that you're creating. So with the parquetry, if you're going to do it that way, where you're building that pattern directly on top or just beside, that alone is going to work on a bunch of our skills. So our visual discrimination, our spatial relations that we had talked about. So is it the same? Is it different? Is there areas that are missing, or did I mix up one shape? It's also going to work on that form constancy, because as I'm looking at the chart here, for example, if I want to place for example, this orange diamond, the picture doesn't really look it, but this is actually orange on here. So if I'm going to place the orange diamond, I have to figure out what orientation to put that diamond in to fit. So if I rotate it and flip it, I can have to figure out what orientation it will actually fit into that shape. And the fact that I need two diamonds that are identical to actually fill up that full shape. So that's going to be our form constancy, that I can tell if I can flip this, how is it going to look, and how is it going to change when I flip and rotate that object. Okay, the diamonds especially are tricky. They have the squares, which are nice. That's usually I use that kind of as a grounding, as a center target or center object, and then I build off of that with some of the more complicated ones. But it gives the patient kind of a grounding area to start with. It's also going to work on our hand-eye coordination, because as you're placing it on here, the blocks are just loose, so you can knock them out of the way if you're not placing it properly. And then also our eye tracking, so glancing back and forth between the pattern and the blocks that we have available. Okay. One way that you can do it if you want to increase our spatial planning and spatial awareness, if you really want to work on that, is that you can have them, like I was saying, you can have them build the pattern right beside, but then be a little bit tricky with it and tell them they can only do the blue ones first, for example. So they're going to have to build all of these blue shapes beside it first, and then build in the other shapes. So then let's say, for example, then you say, okay, you're going to do all the greens. So as they're doing that, then they're going to have to really pay attention to how far away is this blue one from this green one, for example. So they leave enough space that they can fit the red blocks in there as well, too. Okay. Another way that that you can do the parquetry that's going to help to build our visual, or help to work on, sorry, our visual memory and our visualization skills is going to be pick a pretty standard object and ask them to build a shape out of that. So for example, it'll be like, can you build me a flower? And then what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to go through their visual memory bank and find a picture of a flower in their memory, and then visualize that. And so then look to see, well, how can I create that shape in my mind that I'm visualizing? How can I recreate that with these blocks that I have available to me? So for example, they might take the square block as the center, so instead of the circle in the flower, and then build the diamonds around from that. Okay. So just in the comments there, so asking about the sticky tack and then the plexiglass sheet. So that's a great question. So the plexiglass, I just actually went to Home Depot or any like home hardware type store that you can get them from. They'll have, usually they have like huge sheets of plexiglass, and you don't necessarily want those. Sometimes they'll cut them down for you, but at a couple of the home hardware type stores that we have here, they have smaller sheets. So these ones actually, I was able to buy these size plexiglass sheets just like this. I didn't even have to get them cut down as well too. The sticky tack, I usually just go to like a dollar store or a Walmart, and then they'll have sticky tack available there for you. And it's just, as you can see on the back, it's just there's different ones. If you get the white sticky tack though, it gets dirty looking really quickly, so it looks gross after a while. So I usually pick like the blue or the green sticky tack. Not that it actually matters, it still functions the same, but it just looks kind of gross after a while. All right, but yeah, those should be fairly easy to find there for you, but definitely Walmart would have sticky tack, and then I think any home hardware type store would have the plexiglass for you. Yeah. So then another way, with the Parquetry blocks as well too, you can get a bunch of different Parquetry block pattern books available out there, and they come in all different levels. So they're going to start out pretty simple and straightforward, something like these ones. So in here you can see, there we go. So you can see in here, you know, you're going to need to use a square and a diamond to make this shape, and it gives you the exact outline and everything. So it's a lot simpler version of that. This is a great one to start with younger kids, or even really any age, just to make sure that we understand that awareness of space and that orientation. And can I take, like if my diamond is laying on the table this way, can I tell that I can rotate that and then put that in there? And that's my form constancy again, right? And then as you work through different levels of the Parquetry block books, so the set that we have here has 4 different levels, and they're going to work up to, for example, a lot more complex and abstract shapes, something like this. And so, for example, with this one, you're going to have to use several different blocks to fit into this shape here, and you're really going to have to play around with some different options. So, for example, in the corner up over here, I could definitely fit a square into that corner, and it would fit in there. Or I can use the 90-degree corner of my triangle, and I can fit that in there. And so it's a matter of figuring out where you can find that, what shapes are going to fit in there, and the space that's allotted to it. So that's another good one to be able to work on that spatial awareness and spatial planning too. And these books, any of these books here, you can usually get either through, if you're an optometrist, there are like optometry vision therapy groups that have them specifically, and then either ways on Amazon or some places like that, you can usually find different Parquetry block patterns, or even just online. Sometimes you can just Google it and you can just print individual ones as well too, if you don't need like a whole booklet of them. Okay. Then the other way that we do the Parquetry block, and kind of the more common way that we do it in the vision therapy room, is we use our plexiglass sheets again, and I'll build a shape. So for example, start with maybe 3 blocks like this. And like I was mentioning, I'm always going to use the square as my center to start with, at least to make sure the patient understands. Like I said, it gives them a really good grounding point. When we're doing that, so you're going to build a shape here, and then I'm going to ask the patient to build that same shape for me. Let's say they're sitting beside me or across from me, they have to build that same shape. The nice thing when it's on the plexiglass, then once they've built their shape, you can then pick up the plexiglass and rotate it and put it on top of theirs, and then they can see exactly if it's the same. It's not you saying, oh, you know what, this one's on the wrong angle or whatever. They can see if it's different or not. And so it really helps to build that visual discrimination and that awareness. One of the other cool things you can do when you're using the plexiglass and the sticky tack there is I can then also ask the patient to, let's say if we're sitting across from each other and I build this shape, I can then ask the patient to build the same shape from my perspective. So if they're sitting across from me, they're going to see the shape like this, but I want them to build it from what I see, which would be this one. So can they mentally and visualization, can they actually see it from my perspective and my point of view? And can they rotate that shape in their mind and understand how the lefts and rights would work and how the top and bottom would flip or not flip, depending on which way we're doing it. I also sometimes will build it and say to the patient, okay, I want you to build it for me, but when it's rotated by 90 degrees. So they're going to have to build me this shape, for example. And then as they get better with it, then you can get a lot more creative with it. And my patients sometimes stay mean because I'm going to say, I'm going to build you this shape, and I want you to build me the same shape once I rotated it by 90 degrees, flipped it upside down, and then from my perspective. And then they have to do it. So it gets really complicated as we get further along, right? So then they're going to have to rotate it, flip it, and then from my perspective. So it gets a lot more tricky. That type of thing, the mental visualization of seeing the object, flipping it in your mind, rotating it, that is huge for a lot of different math concepts and a lot of different types of math, and also in chemistry and organic chemistry, like those type of subjects. That's what you're doing a lot of the time, is having to see that that molecule or that math equation and see how you can flip that and rotate that. Okay. The other cool thing with Parquetry, which the kids like a lot, is that you can also go 3D with it, right? So you can also build it out as well too, and build it up that way. And then the kids enjoy doing that one because then they see how many they can stack up and make different shapes that way. And then I can also build a shape that's 3D, and they have to try to do that. And then that's going to work on that hand-eye coordination, because can I figure out how to put that block on top and have it balanced there properly. Right. One other way that you can actually do the Parquetry that's going to help to work on some language skills as well as visual skills that we've been talking about is if I build this shape, for example, but I build it where the patient can't see it. And then, so for example, usually I'll just like build it inside the Parquetry box that I have here. I just build the shape in there. And then what I do then is then I'm going to describe the shape to them. So I'm going to say, okay, for example, I have a green square in the middle, and then I have a yellow square on top, or yellow triangle, sorry, on top, and it kind of makes it look like a house. And then underneath the house at the bottom, I have a purple diamond, and it's pointing to the left or whatever direction it's going. Okay, so the cool thing with that then is you're working on that patient's receptive language. So what's their ability to listen to what you're saying and interpret that and create that mental picture in their mind from the language. Alternatively, the patient could build the shape without you seeing it, and then they describe it to you, and then that's going to help work on their expressive language. Okay, so that's another cool way to do it. But yeah, so like I was saying, with Parquetry, there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can do it, different skills that you can do there. I also really like in the vision therapy room, like I keep talking about, I build the shape and then have them rebuild it. And we do that for sure. But at the same time, I also have the patient build a shape themselves and tell me what they want me to do with it. So they build it and then they tell me that I have to make it flipped 90 degrees. When they're doing that, one, especially with the kids, often the kids, you know, it's the adults telling them like, okay, I want you to do this, you have to do this, answer this question or do this test. So it's nice to give them a little bit of the control and let them build it themselves and be a bit more creative that way and see what they come up with. They also think it's fun to try to trick the adult and see if they can mess me up and so I can't create it. So they get a little bit crazy sometimes with the shapes that I have to recreate. But then at the same time, what I have them do is as soon as I rebuild the shape, then I have them tell me if I got it right or not. And so they have to tell me if I got it correct. And when they're doing that, they have to use all those exact same visual skills to know if I actually did it correctly or not. Okay. And that's everything with that we're going to go over with Parquetry. But like I said, there's lots of different ways to use it. So get creative with it. And if you have any questions too, I'm going to have my email up at the end too. So you can always email me if you have questions of a specific case that you want to work on, or your child that you are struggling with certain skills that you want to work with. We can always talk about Parquetry, different ways you can set it up. You can also do memory with it, right? You could create a shape inside the box and then just show it to them for 10 seconds and then let them try to rebuild that, like we had talked about with Qubits earlier. And then you can build that visual memory or that sequential memory. All right, perfect. All right. So that's it for Parquetry. We're just going to go over one last game quickly. Do we still have time, Kalin? Yep, we're good. Okay. So we'll do one more game here. Let me just get this one out of the way. This is a big one. It's heavy. All right. So the last game that we're going to talk about and go over is called Quirkle. So this game is designed for ages 6 and up, and it's for 2 to 4 players. So let's put that one there. This was actually, it's a really fun game. I've actually taken it when I've gone camping and stuff, and my husband and I will play it sometimes just for fun. So it's a really good game. So when you buy Quirkle, you're going to get a bag, and it's going to have a bunch of different tiles in it with different shapes and different colors on it. Okay, so there's 6 different colors and 6 different shapes on the tiles. Okay, So it's kind of like Scrabble without the language piece in it, so without the letters and the words, in that you're going to try to build this grid like what you do in Scrabble. So you will end up with this really busy board at the end of it. You just build on your tabletop. The tiles are just loose and everything like that. So the other thing is going to work on our hand-eye coordination, because again, we want to place it onto our grid without knocking any of the other tiles around too. So that's one piece that it can help with, is that hand-eye coordination there. Okay. So what you're going to do is you're going to pick out 6 different tiles, and then you don't let anybody else see your tiles, and you're going to look to see if you can find tiles that have a matching attribute. Okay, so for example, you want them to all have the same color or all be the same shape. Okay, so for example, and I just stuck these ones together with some sticky tack so it's a bit easier. So for here, we have all of them are orange, but they're all different shapes. So they have to share one attribute and only ever one. So for example, I can't have another orange square or orange circle here because I already have one. Okay. So like I was saying, there's 6 shapes and 6 colors. So when you complete the whole row with all 6 that are available, then that would give you bonus points as well too. And it would be something called a Quirkle. So as you're building, you're going to end up with something that would look like this. So like as you're doing Scrabble, it gets bigger as you go. Same kind of thing here. So you'd have something like this. I'm going to try to get the glare off there for you guys. And so as you're playing, it's going to get busier and busier. And so then that's going to help to work on our visual figure ground, because there's more busyness there and more information for us to have to sort through of what's important and what's not important. Okay. So with these orange ones that I was talking about here, for example, if this was our game board or grid that we've created, and I had these oranges and I wanted to place them, they can, for example, go here, right? And then we're going to add the orange square to it. They could go over on the side here, or they could go on the bottom down here. Okay, we could not put it up here because now I have an orange diamond and a second orange diamond. So that's going to be a duplicate, and you're not allowed to have duplicates within your row. Okay, so and then every time I place some tiles, I'm going to get points for how many tiles I placed and where I placed it on the board. Like I was saying, if you can complete a whole row with all 6, so we have 5 squares here of different colors, so we're missing the green square here. So if I can find the green square in my hand, then I could place that green square here, and then that's going to complete that row. So all 6 available squares are there. So then that's what's called a Quirkle, and then you get bonus points for doing that as well too. Okay, when you're doing this too, is looking for this where you can finish off a row, basically what's missing from that row, what do I need to complete it? That's that visual closure again as well too. Okay, so then when you're looking through there, it's also going to work on our visual discrimination, our spatial relations, because again, we're looking for similarities between the tiles and differences and the attributes there. It's going to work on our memory, because as we're playing and we take turns, so you're playing with, let's say, a group of 4, as everyone's taking their turn, you have to look through and find where your tiles might go and remember that, okay, I had it able to go here, it can go down there, or it can go on the side here. So I have these 3 different options, and I have to remember kind of that picture in my mind of where it can go, and then that would help to work on that visual memory as well. It's also going to help work on our processing speed and our sequence reasoning, in that, again, that gameplay and taking turns, we can have to look through, and we're going to have to change what our plan is. So for example, if I was planning to put my ones here and then someone else takes a turn and they put something there that then blocks me, now I have to try to find a new spot it can go. And so then that's going to work on that visual dexterity, mental dexterity, and that planning and everything there. One other way too that you're going to help work with that gameplay, and again, as you get to more comfortable with it and kind of to a higher level with it, you can also look to see, so for example, if I had these 2 stars here, and they can complete this row here. So if I place these 2 stars, I can place it this way, or I can place it that way, right? to complete the row. And so now I have all 6 stars that are available. So I would get those points for placing my tiles, and I get bonus points for completing the row or getting that Quirkle. But one thing I want to look at is what else is on the board, and this is that spatial planning and that reasoning is looking at it. If I place them this way, where the purple is here and the blue is here, well, now down here I have blue on this side and purple on that side, and so if I place it this way, I can't complete this blue row up here, right? Versus if I flipped it and placed it this way, well, now the lighting's not the best, but so now I have the blue here in line with this. So in theory, if I got these tiles, I would be able to complete that whole row and get those bonus points for that Quirkle there, okay? So just different ways that you can, like, as you're playing the game, you're having to think about how to place it, how to flip it. You might want to place it this way because you have other blue tiles that are coming up or in your hand already, but or you can flip it if you're near the end of the game and you want to block the other players. You could plan to flip it the other way, and then that would stop the other players from being able to get those bonus points from finishing that in there. Okay. And so yeah, so that's Quirkle there for you. Again, nice easy game. It's and it's transportable. It comes in the box, and inside the box is just a bag of all the tiles, so it's easy to take with you if you go on like a trip, or if you're going camping or something. You can toss it in your trailer and go with that game there too. So it's a nice transportable one too. All right, so that's actually it for the games that we're going to be talking about today. Like I say, most of them are available either with local retailers or online. Chapters has a bunch of those games that we talked about there. Also too, I'll put up in a second, I'll put up my email, so you can always message me for questions if you have a specific a person that you're working with and you want to know how to adjust some things. You can always email me. I'm more than happy to answer questions. And then also too, on our Facebook page for the office, so for In-Depth Vision, our Facebook and our Instagram, every week we're actually putting out a list of 4 different games that will work on different visual skills. So these ones and a bunch of other ones. So every week we're saying 4 games, what visual skills it can work on, and different ways that you can adjust that game to play, to adjust what skills you're working on. So I'll screen share here so that you guys can then get that information. Let's see. Okay, can you guys see that okay? Yep, perfect, okay. Perfect, so yeah, my email's on there, and then also the Instagram and the Facebook account. So you can always go on and follow us on either Instagram or Facebook. We have, I think, about 5 or 6 weeks now of different games on there, and each week there's 4 games. And we're going to keep doing that until the end of December. And then also too, going into the new year, I'm planning to do a couple other post series of different things you can do at home to work on different types of visual skills, or different ways that you can recognize when someone might be struggling with their visual skills. So sometimes it's not that obvious, right? You know, somebody comes, tells you they're seeing double vision, or it's blurry for them. It's obvious that it's related to vision. But unfortunately, there's a lot of things that we can see coming up and struggles, for example, at school, that aren't always going to be obvious it's related to their vision. So we're going to do a series as well, too, of different ways to recognize when there's maybe some visual concerns going on there. All right. Now, any questions that anybody has right now, or?
I don't see any in the chat right now. But if you had anything else, I know you were just starting to talk about some of the kind of ways you can recognize problems with different visual skills. If you wanted to go into any of that, we do have a little bit of time. But
okay, perfect. Yeah. So like we're saying, there's some that are pretty obvious in terms of when it's a visual skill, or they're struggling with visual skills. But some of the more subtle ones are some ones that a lot of my patients have a hard time understanding how vision is related. So a lot of times, especially in a classroom setting, if a child is having a lot of behavior issues or attention issues, a lot of times those can be related to vision. So for example, if a child is having a hard time controlling the coordination of their eyes, so there's something called a convergence insufficiency, and that's a difficulty or an inability to efficiently and accurately converge or cross our eyes, which is really important for all mirror work. And so a lot of times when they're doing that, if they're going to read, for example, the words might even be moving around on the page. They might be going double. It can sometimes just make their eyes really tired or sore. And so if they're really uncomfortable, or if the words are moving on the page, they're not going to want to look at that page, for example, and they're not going to look at it for any length of time. And there is some ways that we can actually demonstrate this to patients or to parents as well too, so that you can really see what it feels like. So you can always talk to a local developmental optometrist where you are and see. They would probably be more than happy to show you some different demonstrations there. But a lot of times we're not going to want to keep looking at that page because it's uncomfortable or we can't see it. So then we're going to, talk to our friend instead, or we're going to look out the window, or we're going to start to act up in class, for example, because we're not able to keep looking or focusing on that page there, for example. So that's one thing we see a lot of time come up, is different behavioral or attention issues that are actually related to vision. And so unfortunately, a lot of times the kids, I have a lot of kids coming in and they're being labeled as like a behavior problem in the class, and really it's just that they're not seeing things properly and they're really uncomfortable with that. Okay, perfect. Good.
All right, so does anybody have any questions for Dr. Cookson about visual skills or about any other games or activities you're considering? All right, well, not seeing or hearing any.
All right.
Thank you very, very much for sharing those 4 games. And again, I would recommend anybody to go and check out her Facebook page for way more suggestions. Like she said, I think there's like more than 20 already posted there, some really great gift ideas. So go ahead and check out that Facebook page. All right. Thank you, Dr. Cookson.
Okay.
Appreciate
Thank you. Have a great day.
Great. Happy holidays, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.